You don't lack discipline because life is hard. You lack discipline because you're addicted to comfort and you lie to yourself about it. You tell yourself you're burnt out, overthinking, or waiting for the right time. That's coward language. Discipline isn't missing from your life by accident. You avoid it on purpose because discipline exposes who you really are. And most men can't handle that mirror. Here's the truth you don't want to hear. Discipline doesn't feel empowering at the start. It feels humiliating. It feels like being stripped of excuses. It forces you to confront the fact that no one is holding you back except your weak impulses. That's why people avoid it. Not because it's impossible, but because it removes their victim identity. And without that identity, they have nothing to hide behind. Now let's talk about something most people misunderstand completely: speaking in tongues, not the religious fantasy version. I'm talking about the moment a man stops speaking the language of his past self. The old vocabulary, the old excuses, the old emotional reactions. Speaking in tongues is when your internal dialogue changes so violently that the old you can't even understand the new you. You don't negotiate with yourself anymore. You don't explain. You command. That's a different language. That's power. Discipline is the translator. Discipline rewires how you think, how you respond, how you move through pain. When you're disciplined, your mind stops screaming for comfort and starts executing orders. Hunger becomes fuel. Boredom becomes silence. Pain becomes confirmation you're on the right path. This is an identity shift, not a habit change. Weak men try to build routines. Strong men rebuild themselves. Most men fail here because they want discipline to feel motivating. That's feminine thinking. Discipline isn't supposed to hype you up. It's supposed to shut you up. It kills emotional noise. It kills hesitation. It replaces feelings with function. When you're truly disciplined, you don't need inspiration. You don't need support. You don't need validation. You move because movement is who you are. This is why disciplined men are feared. They don't explain themselves. They don't react emotionally. They don't break when things go wrong. They speak in a different tongue, short, direct, ruthless. Their actions communicate dominance louder than words ever could. While everyone else is talking about mindset, they're executing. While others are finding balance, they're taking territory. Most men are trapped because they are waiting to feel ready. They sit around hoping for a surge of motivation, a burst of energy, a sign that today is different. That feeling never comes. And even when it does, it disappears the moment discomfort shows up. That's not bad luck. That's the predictable outcome of depending on emotion to do a job that only discipline can handle. Discipline was never designed to feel good. It was designed to function when feelings collapse. Here's the uncomfortable reality: motivation is unreliable by nature. It's reactive, emotional, and tied to mood. Discipline is proactive. It doesn't care how you feel when you wake up. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for alignment, clarity, or confidence. The disciplined man moves first and lets confidence chase him later. That's why most people fail early. They believe action follows motivation, when in reality motivation is a byproduct of action taken under pressure. The moment you decide discipline requires inspiration, you've handed control of your life to your emotions. And emotions are weak leaders. They get tired, they get scared, they negotiate. Discipline does none of that. Discipline is a decision that was already made and is no longer open for discussion. There is no daily debate. There is no internal argument. There is only execution. That's why it's powerful. It removes choice from moments where weakness usually wins. Men who rely on motivation live in cycles. They start strong, post quotes, talk big, then disappear the second resistance appears. Disciplined men don't cycle. They operate in straight lines. Even on bad days, progress continues because movement is non-negotiable. This is what separates amateurs from dangerous men. One is driven by mood. The other is driven by obligation to his own standard. The truth most avoid is that discipline feels like pressure at the beginning. It feels restrictive. It feels unfair. It feels like you're doing more than everyone else while getting less credit. Good. That pressure is what forges authority. When you act without needing to feel good, you stop being controlled by comfort. Comfort is the leash most men never see around their necks. When discipline becomes your default, something changes internally. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "What needs to be done?" That shift alone puts you ahead of 90% of people. Not because you're smarter, but because you're no longer wasting mental energy on negotiation. Energy that used to be spent arguing with yourself is now spent producing results. This is why discipline chosen in advance is unstoppable. You don't wake up and decide again. You already decided yesterday, last week, months ago. The decision is locked. The only thing left is to act it out. That's how elite performance is built. Not through hype, not through emotion, but through pre-committed behavior executed daily, regardless of circumstances. If you want proof, look at any man who dominates his field. He doesn't rely on feeling good. He relies on systems, standards, and self-imposed pressure. He understands that waiting to feel motivated is the most expensive mistake a man can make. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself every day. It's about removing the option to quit. Once quitting is off the table, progress becomes inevitable. Most men don't fail because life is unfair. They fail because excuses feel safer than responsibility. An excuse gives you temporary relief from pressure, but it also quietly robs you of power. The moment you explain why something couldn't be done, you've surrendered control. You've told the world, and more importantly yourself, that your circumstances are in charge, not you. That mindset doesn't protect you. It cages you. Excuses are attractive because they sound reasonable. They wear professional language. They hide behind logic, lack of time, lack of resources, bad timing, low energy, other people. All of it sounds intelligent, mature, even justified. That's why weak men defend their excuses so aggressively. They've invested in them. Excuses become emotional assets, something they guard because without them, there's nothing left to blame. The dangerous part is this: excuses don't appear when you're failing. They appear when you're about to grow. Right before effort is required, the mind produces explanations to preserve comfort. It's not random. It's a defense mechanism. Growth threatens identity, and excuses are the shield that keeps identity intact. If you accept this, you stop seeing excuses as harmless thoughts and start recognizing them as the enemy of progress. Men who live on excuses are always busy, always tired, always working on something. Yet nothing materializes. They mistake activity for movement. They confuse planning with execution. An excuse allows them to stay in motion without ever advancing. That illusion is comforting, but it's deadly. Years pass, potential decays, and the man still believes his breakthrough is coming. Once the excuses run out, they never do. Responsibility is avoided because it's heavy. Once you accept full responsibility, there is no one left to rescue you, no external villain, no unfair system to blame. Just you and the outcome. That level of ownership is terrifying to most men because it removes emotional safety nets. But that same weight is what builds strength. Responsibility is pressure, and pressure creates structure. A disciplined man treats excuses like weakness signals. The moment an excuse appears, he recognizes it as resistance, not truth. He doesn't argue with it. He overrides it. This is where most people get it wrong. They think strength means having better excuses or more convincing reasons. Strength is acting without reasons. Strength is doing the work even when every internal voice says delay it. The more excuses you allow, the more you train your brain to escape effort. Over time, this becomes automatic. Challenge triggers avoidance. Difficulty triggers explanation. Before you realize it, you've built a personality around avoidance. Breaking that pattern requires brutal honesty. You must admit that excuses aren't protecting you from failure. They are guaranteeing it. Men who dominate don't eliminate excuses because life is easy. They eliminate excuses because excuses dilute authority. You cannot command respect from others if you can't command action from yourself. Every excuse weakens your internal leadership. Every act of responsibility strengthens it. This is why high-level men speak differently. Shorter sentences, fewer explanations, more outcomes. When you remove excuses, something uncomfortable happens. Your results become honest. There's no buffer, no narrative, no story to soften failure. If you didn't win, you didn't do enough. That clarity is painful at first, but it's addictive. It creates precision. You know exactly where you stand, exactly what needs to improve, and exactly who is accountable. This is why excuses are a luxury only weak men protect. Strong men can't afford them. They cost too much. They steal time, energy, and credibility. Once excuses are gone, progress becomes brutal, direct, and unavoidable. And at that point, there's no confusion about why you're winning. Most men are not defeated by the world. They are defeated by the way they speak to themselves. The internal dialogue running in your head decides your ceiling long before reality gets a vote. If that voice is emotional, negotiable, and filled with questions, your actions will always hesitate. You don't need more confidence. You need a different internal language. One that doesn't ask how you feel before it acts. Pay attention to how most men talk to themselves when pressure hits. They ask questions. Should I do this now? What if it doesn't work? Maybe tomorrow would be better. That language is uncertainty disguised as intelligence. Questions create delay. Delay creates weakness. Weakness becomes identity. The man who questions himself under pressure has already lost control of the situation. Power begins when the internal voice changes from discussion to command, short, direct, final. There is no debate. There is no emotional processing. There is only instruction followed by movement. This is not aggression. This is clarity. High-performing men don't waste mental energy narrating their feelings. They issue orders to themselves and execute without drama. This shift feels uncomfortable at first because it removes emotional safety. When you stop asking yourself how you feel, you expose yourself to discomfort without justification. That's exactly why it works. Emotional language is designed to protect comfort. Command language is designed to produce results. One preserves the ego, the other builds authority. Most people mistake harsh self-talk for negativity and soft self-talk for self-respect. That's backward. Real self-respect is not coddling yourself with understanding words. It's demanding standards and enforcing them. When your internal language becomes firm and non-negotiable, your behavior aligns automatically. You don't need reminders. You don't need accountability partners. The voice in your head becomes the authority. Notice how disciplined men respond to obstacles. They don't dramatize. They don't spiral internally. Their inner language stays mechanical. Adjust. Continue. Solve it. That tone keeps the nervous system steady. Emotional narration creates chaos. Command language creates stability. Stability under pressure is dominance. This is why changing habits without changing internal language never lasts. You can force routines temporarily, but if your inner voice remains emotional and forgiving, you will eventually negotiate your way out. The language you use internally defines what behavior is acceptable. If your internal dialogue allows excuses, your actions will follow. If it allows commands only, excuses die. There is also a deeper transformation that happens when your internal language shifts. You stop identifying as someone who tries. You become someone who acts. The words, "I'll try," disappear. They are replaced by, "It gets done." That difference alone changes how others perceive you. People feel certainty before they hear results. Certainty comes from how you carry yourself. And that comes from how you speak to yourself when no one is watching. Men who master this don't look rushed or anxious. They move with a controlled pace because there's no internal conflict draining them. Internal conflict is loud. Resolution is quiet. When your internal language is clean and decisive, your presence becomes heavier. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to prove anything. Your actions already carry authority. Most men will never do this because it feels too cold, too strict, too unforgiving. Good, warm, forgiving language creates soft lives. Cold, precise language creates sharp men. If you want power, start by eliminating emotional chatter inside your own head. Speak to yourself like someone you respect enough to demand excellence from. Most men waste their energy trying to build habits while ignoring the more dangerous problem. They don't know who they are. Habits are fragile because they sit on top of identity, not the other way around. When pressure hits, habits collapse, and whatever identity exists underneath takes control. That's why men who rely on routines fall apart the moment life gets uncomfortable. Their habits were never anchored to something solid. And identity is not what you say you are. It's what you default to when no one is watching and nothing is going your way. If your identity is weak, no habit will survive stress. You can wake up early for a week, train hard for a month, eat clean for 90 days, and still revert the moment emotional friction appears. Not because you're undisciplined, but because your self-image hasn't changed. Most men secretly see themselves as someone who tries. That single word destroys consistency. A man who tries gives himself permission to fail gracefully. A man who identifies as disciplined doesn't try. He acts. Identity removes options. Habits still require effort. Identity removes debate. That's why identity wins every time. When discipline becomes part of who you are, behavior follows automatically. You don't think about going to the gym. You don't weigh options. You don't negotiate with comfort. The action is aligned with self-image, so resistance disappears. This is the difference between forcing discipline and embodying it. One drains willpower. The other conserves it. This is also why external accountability rarely works long-term. If your identity is soft, no coach, app, or system can save you. You might perform temporarily, but once the external pressure is gone, so is the behavior. Identity is internal pressure. It follows you everywhere. It doesn't turn off. That's why it's so powerful and so uncomfortable to build. The process is brutal because identity change requires killing the old version of yourself. You must stop protecting who you were. You must stop explaining your past behavior. You must stop defending old patterns. Most men refuse to do this because they're emotionally attached to their old identity. They want progress without loss. That's not how it works. Growth demands sacrifice, and the first sacrifice is your previous self-image. Men who succeed at this operate differently under stress. When something goes wrong, they don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What does a disciplined man do next?" That question alone changes outcomes. It shifts focus from emotion to standard. Standards don't care about mood. Standards demand compliance. Once identity shifts, habits become byproducts. You don't track streaks. You don't count days. You don't celebrate consistency because consistency is normal. Celebrating discipline means it's still optional. When discipline is identity, it's expected. The absence of it feels wrong, not the presence of it. This is why men with strong identities appear effortless. People assume they're naturally motivated or genetically gifted. They're not. They simply remove the option to live inconsistently. Their behavior is locked in by who they believe they are. Weak identity creates constant inner conflict. Strong identity creates alignment. Most men will never experience this because it requires ruthless honesty. You must admit that your current identity is the problem. Not your schedule, not your environment, not your motivation. You. Until that is faced, habits will always be temporary. When identity changes, discipline stops being a struggle and becomes a natural expression of who you are. Most men interpret discomfort as a warning sign. The moment something feels hard, awkward, or painful, they assume something is wrong. They slow down, pull back, or quit entirely. That reaction is conditioned, not intelligent. Pain is not an enemy, it is a signal. And for men who understand growth, pain is often proof that they are moving ahead of the crowd rather than falling behind it. Comfort has trained people to fear effort. Modern life rewards ease, speed, and convenience, so the nervous system panics the moment friction appears. But friction is where separation happens. Anyone can operate inside comfort. Very few can function under pressure without emotional collapse. That is why pressure is valuable. It filters out those who are serious from those who are just interested. Pain shows up when you step outside your previous limits. Muscles burn when they are forced to adapt. Lungs struggle when capacity is being expanded. The mind resists when identity is being challenged. None of this is accidental. These sensations are evidence of upgrade, not damage. Men who avoid pain remain exactly as they are. Men who learn to interpret it correctly evolve. Most people fail because they personalize pain. They tell themselves it means they are weak, unprepared, or not built for success. That interpretation is the real problem. Pain is not commentary on your worth. It is feedback on your position. It tells you where you are in relation to your limits. Ignore it and you stagnate. Respect it and you grow. There is a mental shift that separates dominant men from average ones. Dominant men stop asking how to avoid discomfort and start asking how to endure it longer. They don't romanticize pain, but they don't run from it either. They understand that every advantage they want sits on the other side of sustained discomfort. Strength, authority, resilience, and confidence are all earned currencies. Pain is the cost. This is why disciplined men appear calm in situations that break others. Their relationship with discomfort is different. Where others feel threatened, they feel focused. Where others feel overwhelmed, they feel engaged. They have trained themselves to stay functional while uncomfortable. That skill alone places them ahead of most people in any competitive environment. Pain also has a psychological effect that comfort never produces. It sharpens awareness. It forces presence. When things are hard, you pay attention. You become precise. Comfort dulls the senses. It encourages laziness and distraction. Pain demands respect. It brings you into the moment and strips away nonsense. That mental clarity is one of its greatest benefits. Most men never experience this because they escape pain the moment it appears. They numb it with entertainment, excuses, or distraction. In doing so, they also numb their potential. You cannot selectively avoid pain and still expect growth. The same nervous system that feels discomfort is the one that adapts. Shut it down and progress stops. Men who win consistently develop a rule. If something is difficult but aligned with their long-term goals, they lean into it. They don't look for shortcuts. They don't ask for easier paths. They understand that the difficulty itself is what creates the advantage. Easy paths are crowded. Hard paths are empty. Pain also builds credibility with yourself. Every time you endure discomfort without quitting, you prove something internally. Self-trust is built through kept promises under pressure. That trust becomes confidence, and confidence becomes presence. People sense it. They respond to it. Not because you talk about it, but because it's carried in how you move. Most men will continue to interpret pain as a reason to stop. A few will recognize it as a sign they are exactly where they need to be. That difference decides who stays average and who separates permanently. Most men think dominance is loud. They confuse power with noise, aggression with authority, and attention with influence. That misunderstanding keeps them performing instead of producing. Real dominance is built quietly through repetition, control, and consistency that doesn't need an audience. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is restraint, and restraint is what separates men who command from men who seek validation. A man who talks too much reveals insecurity. He explains himself because he wants approval. He announces plans because he needs encouragement. He reacts emotionally because he hasn't mastered control. Silence removes all of that. When you stop narrating your intentions, you force yourself to let results speak. That pressure sharpens behavior. There's no applause to lean on, no reassurance to borrow. Only execution. Consistency is where most men break. They can perform once. They can push hard for a short period. But repetition exposes character. Doing the same difficult thing again and again without excitement, recognition, or novelty requires internal order. Consistency is not about intensity. It's about reliability. And reliability is terrifying to undisciplined men because it removes excuses. When a man becomes consistent, he becomes predictable in the best way. People know what to expect from him. He shows up, he delivers, he doesn't fluctuate with mood or circumstances. That predictability builds trust, and trust builds influence. Not emotional influence, but operational influence. People rely on him because he is stable under pressure. Control is the foundation that holds silence and consistency together. Control over emotions, control over reactions, control over impulses. A man without control is always reacting to the environment. He's easy to manipulate, easy to provoke, easy to distract. A controlled man chooses when to act and when to remain still. That choice is power. This is why disciplined men don't rush to respond. They pause, they assess, they decide. That pause is not hesitation, it's dominance. It signals that nothing external can force them into action. They move on their own terms. That alone changes how others treat them. Most men underestimate how visible control is. You don't need to announce it. It shows in posture, tone, timing, and restraint. People feel it instinctively. A man who controls himself doesn't need to control others aggressively. His presence sets the frame. Others adjust naturally. Silence also protects momentum. When you stop talking about what you're building, you conserve energy. Words cost focus. Explanations create emotional attachment. Silence keeps your mind clean and directed. You're not managing opinions. You're not defending choices. You're working. Consistency compounds in silence. Day after day, effort stacks quietly until the gap becomes undeniable. By the time people notice, it's too late to compete. They're shocked because they weren't watching. They were too busy talking. This is where control becomes lethal. You don't celebrate early. You don't reveal progress. You don't seek permission. You keep moving while others underestimate you. Underestimation is an advantage. Loud men attract resistance. Quiet men bypass it. Most men avoid this path because it's lonely. Silence removes external stimulation. Consistency removes excitement. Control removes emotional highs. What's left is structure, pressure, and solitude. Weak men need noise to feel alive. Strong men don't. When silence, consistency, and control combine, dominance becomes inevitable. Not dominance through force, but through gravity. People listen when you speak because you rarely do. People follow because your behavior is dependable. People respect you because you respect your own standards. Men who master this don't chase attention. Attention finds them, not because they demanded it, but because sustained results are impossible to ignore. So understand this clearly. Discipline is not about self-control. It's about self-erasure. You erase the weak version of you and replace it with something colder, sharper, and harder to kill. Most people won't do this because it costs them their excuses, their comfort, and their identity as a victim. Good. Let them stay weak. If you want power, stop asking how to be disciplined and start acting like a man who doesn't have a choice. Because real discipline isn't a tool you use. It's a language you speak. And once you speak it fluently, the old world stops recognizing you. And that's when you know you've won.